Here's what we learned how to make in this video. Hello there, my inspirations. My name is Inspirasper, and in this video, I'm going to teach you how to make your first progressive house drop from scratch. It's worth noting that nothing I'm about to teach you is set in stone as the only way to go about this. This is just my personal take on the genre, and the intention here is to potentially motivate you to make your own song in a similar manner. That being said, let's not waste any more time and let's get into it. Starting off with a few general things, set your session BPM to 128. Next, consider lowering the master volume of your session and raising the volume of your computer for mixing. This will prevent any potential clipping into the red and will help out later down the road when it comes time to master your song. Then, decide what key to be in. As a personal preference, I enjoy writing out my key in a piano roll and keeping it to the left of where my MIDI clip starts, so that way I have a reference when it comes time to write my melody or chord progressions. Now, on to the percussion. The kicks are the most energetic and punchy part of any progressive house track, so I figured it's a good place to start. Find kick samples that you enjoy, and if need be, you can even layer multiple samples over top of each other to get the sound that you like. In this case, I found 2 samples, and I stacked them on top of each other. I made sure to EQ them so the low ends have a bit more gain, as well as a good majority of the mid to high frequencies. This particular EQ is actually a preset in Ableton, intended for kick drums, but just be careful that when stacking kick samples, you don't boost too much of the low ends. Too many kick samples playing at once can create way too much gain in those low ranges, so be sure to either lower how much gain you add down there, or adjust each sample's volume levels accordingly. To go along with the kicks, you'll want some sample playing above them every time they hit. You could add in things here such as snaps, claps, or cymbals. Something relatively quick and snappy that populates the high frequency range. In my example, I have some short cymbal crashes that sound like this. I didn't do anything fancy with these other than just adjust their volume to my liking, but you could cut out any low frequencies from here since you really only need the top end to shine through. Now comes the time where you actually write your song. You can do any of the following steps in whatever order you like, but personally, I prefer to start with my chords and work from here. So I'll write in a chord progression in whatever key I chose. To keep things simple to start with, I created an 8-bar long MIDI clip and drew in a chord progression consisting of only triads that hit at the beginning of every bar. Super simple stuff, but once I made something like that, I built upon that progression by adding more stacked notes on top of what I made, being sure to stay in key at all times. The more complex work you put into your chords now will typically result in a more genuine and unique song, as it serves as a nice foundation. Once I had a chord progression that I was happy with, I shortened my chords to only hit for 1/8 of a bar long in the following pattern. At this point, I went to work on my sound design. My goal for these chord stacks were to fill in the gaps of my song. I mean, I guess these are really the only elements of the song I have at the moment, but long term, down the road, they will serve as background elements of my song. Ultimately, these layers will blend in with the song and shouldn't be immediately recognizable in the final mix, but are a crucial element of the track. To get what I wanted, I used Serum to turn these into super saws, a chord stack that produces a wide, powerful sound. These don't necessarily require a third-party plugin like Serum to be made. You can use some Ableton instruments that can replicate the sound fairly well. For example, the default analog instrument, after you tinker around with it for a little bit, it can resemble something similar. The point is, you want something along these lines. I would recommend duplicating a few layers of the same exact chord progression, but with slightly different instruments on each of them. This can create more voices on the chords and ultimately allows for a wider range to be covered. Group these tracks together and EQ them to cut off any low frequencies. At the moment of explaining how to do this right now, we don't know the exact location to put this high-pass filter, but later, when it comes time to making the bass, we will. So put this in the back of your mind as something to come back to later when you have worked on that. Consider adding in other audio effects such as reverb or whatever to your liking, either on the whole group or on individual tracks. And finally, be sure to put a compressor on the entire group for side chaining. Route this to your kick drums so that they don't get overpowered, but they're still able to shine through. We will be doing this for every group of layers used in this song. Our chords are now finished, and it's time to write a melody. There's plenty of freedom here, but the crucial takeaways are to generally stay in key and also to create a rhythm that you enjoy. Typically, progressive house melodies are rather simple, yet super catchy. Add in instruments onto your melody and duplicate your layers a few times for multiple sounds. The goal here is to create individual layers that sound good by themselves, but when grouped together, create one smooth overall melodic sound, as if it were its own instrument. To accomplish this, consider doing any of the following tricks. Maybe lower one layer's melody by an octave and EQ it so you only get mid-range sounds, or do the opposite and raise the melody by an octave and isolate the high ends. Consider creating a layer that has a quick attack and a short decay, so essentially the sound quickly chimes in and goes away, like a xylophone for example. Or consider elongating each note so it has a rather large sustain, replicating what it would be like if you were playing your melody on a 70s techno-funk keyboard, for example, I don't know. Add some audio effects and especially EQ each track so that you create one powerful grouped together sound, but don't go overboard. Same as with our chords track, we now want to EQ the whole group to cut off the low ends where the bass will be. And we also want to add in that same sidechaining compressor, except this time maybe lighten up the amount, since we want our leads to be one of the more prominent elements of the song. Now onto our bass line. This can be done super easily by copying our layer of chords and deleting everything except for the bottommost note on every chord. What we're left with is a series of single notes that hit at the same time as our chords, and we now want to turn this into a bass line. I created 3 copies of this MIDI clip. One layer will be used for our sub bass. This covers the lowest of all low ranges and is practically impossible to hear by itself. Throw on any instrument that has a simple saw wave and bump down the octaves of that MIDI clip until you get a very deep sound. At this point, EQ your layer such that only a small range is covered in the low ends. For example, anything below, I don't know, 123 Hertz in my example. The result should be something that is hard to hear at the volume that you're using to mix the track, and that's perfectly fine, since a little will go a long way here. This will contribute to the punchy, rumbly feel of your track. Our second layer of bass is what you will hear the most, and should be the grittiest of all the layers. All this consisted of for me is a square saw wave at a low octave, EQ'd to cover from whatever the high end of our sub bass was, so in my case 123 Hertz, to somewhere around 300-400 Hertz. Add in any other audio effects you may desire to make this stand out, such as a compressor, for example. Finally, our third layer of bass is a higher layer that I have changed to play every 16th bar, which is relatively quicker than all my other layers. This layer is also a square wave, but this time fills in the frequency range of 300 to about 600 Hertz. Group these together and add in a low pass filter to prevent any sounds beyond our highest element. So in my case, I capped it off at about 772. As we did for our chord group, be sure to sidechain this to the kick drums as well. We took care of our bass, so you know what that means. We need to go back to our other layers and EQ them so they have a high pass filter where our bass got cut off. This way the other layers don't intrude on our bass, and vice versa, without leaving any uncovered gaps in the middle. Listening to our drop now, it sounds pretty good. But there are a few minor layers to add that'll add some subtle details. We're moving on to a group that will consist of general sound effects, and the first thing to add in is a layer of white noise. This will fill in the high ends of our track. The goal here is to create audio that rests on top of our song like a layer of fresh snow on the listener's ears. Just something soft that you don't pick up on when it's there, but definitely notice when it's missing, you know? So I copied our layer of chords and manipulated the notes such that it only plays half as often. Truth be told, there's no reason for this to be a stack of chords. It could just be one note, but the emphasis is just getting the rhythm right. We want it to hit at the right time. Next, I added in an instrument to play the white noise. A perfect and super quick way to do this is add in an analog instrument, in Ableton for example, and change the oscillator's shape to noise. Now just add in a high pass filter to include anything in the tippy top range, anything above 3.5 thousand Hertz, roughly. I also added in some reverb to extend that sound slightly and lowered the track's volume by about 8 decibels. Finally, it's time to add in some crashing sound effects to amplify the powerful nature of your drop as it hits. I found some samples online by searching for noise falls and noise risers, and added in some crashes as the drop hit, and then a few leading up to the end of the drop to kind of build up that excitement to wrap it all together. I mostly EQ'd these to only take up high frequencies as well, so they act in a similar manner to that of our white noise layer. As is tradition, be sure to sidechain our FX groups to our kicks, and our drop is pretty much done. At this point, you would most likely turn this into a full-length song rather than only release a 30-second bit, so next steps would be to create the rest of the song, most likely including things like an intro and a build-up, maybe a bridge. But this video is already a little bit lengthy, and that could be a topic for another day. Just keep in mind that eventually you will have to master your track, as it really won't have that crisp finish until you do. But other than that, this was how you make a progressive house drop. If you made it this far, I've given you a bit of my time and hopefully helped you out, so why not pay back the favor by subscribing to this channel? That way you catch every new video like this one in the future, and also consider following me on social media where I post updates on what I'm working on. Also, if you watch this video, then you probably enjoy music in one way or the other, so feel free to listen to my songs when you get the chance. You can find all the links to these goodies in the description below. Alright, that's enough shameless self-promotion for now. Thanks for watching, have a good day.